أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. ياسين والقرآن الحكيم إنك لمن المرسلين على صراط مستقيم تنزيل العزيز الرحيم لتنذر قوما ما أنذر آباؤهم فهم غافلون لقد حق القول على أكثرهم فهم لا يؤمنون إنا جعلنا في أعناقهم أغلالا فهي إلى الأذقان فهم مقمحون وجعلنا من بين أيديهم سدا ومن خلفهم سدا فأغشيناهم فهم لا يبصرون وسواء عليهم أنذرتهم أم لم تنذرهم لا يؤمنون إنما تنذر من اتبع الذكر وخشي الرحمن بالغيب فبشره بمغفرة وأجر كريم إنا نحن نحيي الموتى ونكتب ما قدموا وآثارهم وكل شيء أحصيناه في إمام مبين واضرب لهم مثلا أصحاب القرية إذ جاءها المرسلون إذ أرسلنا إليهم اثنين فكذبوهما فعززنا بثالث فقالوا إنا إليكم مرسلون قالوا ما أنتم إلا بشر مثلنا وما أنزل الرحمن من شيء إن أنتم إلا تكذبون قالوا ربنا يعلم إنا إليكم لمرسلون وما علينا إلا البلاغ المبين قالوا إنا تطيرنا بكم لئن لم تنتهوا لنرجمنكم وليمسنكم منا عذاب عليم قالوا طائركم معكم أئن ذكرتم بل أنتم قوم مسرفون وجاء من أقصى المدينة رجل يسعى قال يا قوم اتبعوا المرسلين اتبعوا من لا يسألكم أجرا وهم مهتدون وما لي لا أعبد الذي فطرني وإليه ترجعون أتخذ من دونه آلهة إن يردني الرحمن بضر لا تغن عني شفاعتهم شيئا ولا ينقذون إني إذا لفي ضلال مبين إني آمنت بربكم فاسمعون قيل ادخل الجنة قال يا ليت قومي يعلمون بما غفر لي ربي وجعلني من المكرمين وما أنزلنا على قومه من بعده من جند من السماء وما كنا منزلين إن كانت إلا صيحة واحدة فإذا هم خامدون يا حسرة على العباد ما يأتيهم من رسول إلا كانوا به يستهزئون ألم يروا كم أهلكنا قبلهم من القرون أنهم إليهم لا يرجعون وإن كل لما جميع لدينا محضرون وآية لهم الأرض الميتة أحييناها وأخرجنا منها حبا فمنه يأكلون وجعلنا فيها جنات من نخيل وأعناب وفجرنا فيها من العيون ليأكلوا من ثمره وما عملته أيديهم أفلا يشكرون سبحان الذي خلق الأزواج كلها مما تنبت الأرض ومن أنفسهم ومما لا يعلمون وآية لهم الليل نسلخ منه النهار فإذا هم مظلمون والشمس تجري لمستقر لها ذلك تقدير العزيز العليم والقمر قدرناه منازل حتى عاد كالعرجون القديم لا الشمس ينبغي لها أن تدرك القمر ولا الليل سابق النهار وكل في فلك يسبحون وآية لهم أنا حملنا ذريتهم في الفلك المشحون وخلقنا لهم من مثله ما يركبون وإن نشأ نغرقهم فلا صريخ لهم ولا هم ينقذون إلا رحمة منا ومتاعا إلى حين وإذا قيل لهم اتقوا ما بين أيديكم وما خلفكم لعلكم ترحمون وما يأتيهم من آية من آيات ربهم إلا كانوا عنها معرضين وإذا قيل لهم أنفقوا مما رزقكم الله قال الذين كفروا للذين آمنوا أنطعم من لو يشاء الله أطعمه إن أنتم إلا في ضلال مبين ويقولون متى هذا الوعد إن كنتم صادقين ما ينظرون إلا صيحة واحدة تأخذهم وهم يخصمون فلا يستطيعون توصية ولا إلى أهلهم يرجعون ونفخ في الصور فإذا هم من الأجداث إلى ربهم ينسلون قالوا يا ويلنا من بعثنا من مرقدنا هذا ما وعد الرحمن وصدق المرسلون إن كانت إلا صيحة واحدة فإذا هم جميع لدينا محضرون فاليوم لا تظلم نفس شيئا ولا تجزون إلا ما كنتم تعملون إن أصحاب الجنة اليوم في شغل فاكهون هم وأزواجه في ظلال على الأرائك متكئون له فيها فاكهة ولهم ما يدعون سلام قولا من رب رحيم وامتازوا اليوم أيها المجرمون ألم أعهد إليكم يا بني آدم ألا تعبدوا الشيطان إنه لكم عدو مبين وأن اعبدوني هذا صراط مستقيم. ولقد أضل منكم جبلا كثيرا أفلم تكونوا تعقلون. هذه جهنم التي كنتم توعدون اصلوها اليوم بما كنتم تكفرون. اليوم نختم على أفواههم وتكلمنا أيديهم وتشهد أرجلهم بما كانوا يكسبون. ولو نشاء لطمسنا على أعينهم فاستبقوا الصراط فأنى يبصرون. ولو نشاء لمسخناهم على مكانتهم فما استطاعوا مضيا ولا يرجعون. ومن نعمره ننكسه في الخلق أفلا يعقلون. فما علمناه الشعر وما ينبغي له إن هو إلا ذكر وقرآن مبين لينذر من كان حيا ويحق القول على الكافرين. أولم يروا أنا خلقنا لهم مما عملت أيدينا أنعاما فهم لها مالكون وظللناها لهم فمنها ركوبهم ومنها يأكلون ولهم فيها منافع ومشارب أفلا يشكرون. واتخذوا من دون الله آلهة لعلهم ينصرون لا يستطيعون نصرهم وهم لهم جند محضرون. فلا يحزنك قولهم إنا نعلم ما يسرون وما يعلنون. أولم ير الإنسان أنا خلقناه من نطفة فإذا هو خصيم مبين وضرب لنا مثلا ونسي خلقه قال من يحيي العظام وهي رميم قل يحييها الذي أنشأها أول مرة وهو بكل خلق عليم. الذي جعل لكم من الشجر الأخضر نارا فإذا أنتم منه توقدون. أوليس الذي خلق السماوات والأرض بقادر على أن يخلق مثلهم بلى وهو الخلاق العليم. إنما أمره إذا أراد شيئا أن يقول له كن فيكون. فسبحان الذي بيده ملكوت كل شيء وإليه ترجعون. صدق الله العلي العظيم. اللهم صل على محمد.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين سيدنا ومولانا بالقاسم محمد وعلى آل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين المعصومين المظلومين الذين أذهب الله عنهم الرجس وطهرهم تطهيرا. أما بعد، قال الله الحكيم في كتابه الكريم: بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. ولقد كتبنا في الزبور من بعد الذكر أن الأرض يرثها عبادي الصالحون. صدق الله العلي العظيم. Our series of discussions of gone onto its 5th night. In these last couple of nights, we've been looking at how to recalibrate ourselves, reconnect ourselves. Reconnect ourselves in such a way that removes the stains of the entire year that causes confusion and darkness. That saying of Amir al-Mu'mineen is very profound. That when he takes Kumail into the desert and he begins to talk to him about the last days, and especially after the death of Sayyid al-Shuhada, he says at that stage, he says, after Hussein is murdered, after he's killed, Walala and Dhulamat will spread across this ummah. Darkness and confusion. See, when darkness and confusion spreads, the first thing that happens is that we begin to fragment into different parties and communities. And as that begins to happen, ego, nafs, power, desire for wealth, all of these things start seeping in. When this starts seeping in, then sincerity is lost in that community. And when sincerity is lost, you end up losing your own self. You're so ingrained and engrossed in your own life. You're so one track that you don't really see what's happening around you. True ma'rifah, true knowledge, essentially is when you look through the lens of Allah and you see all of creation. This is what you've been created for. But you find 99.9% of the world never realizes this. You don't see further than yourself. All you see is, I've been offended. I've been wronged. And then when you finish with yourself, then you end up judging other people. Look at the way he is, look at the way she is. He calls himself an alim, he calls himself a jahil, he calls him, etc., etc. The fact is this: in the wadi of ishq, judgment is suspended. Judgment is only for Allah. And the reason being is this: because however you judge, your knowledge will always be limited. Absolute knowledge is only for that who's the judge. This is why you find that the only human being who is worthy enough of judging someone is Insan-e Kamil. And Insan-e Kamil is your Imam. That person appointed by Allah. Why? Because he's that wasila that we understand Tawheed through. Look, Allah's Ghaibul Ghayub. You know what that means? Allah is hidden. Or as one tradition says, Kuntu kanzal makhfiya. فَأَحْبَبْتُ أَنْ أَعْرَفْ. Allah is a hidden treasure. You can't know Him and you can't understand Him. You know why? Because you're restricted and you're a creation. Allah is non-restricted and He's not a creation, He creates. Therefore, what He is and you are two different things. Let me put it another way. You exist Allah's existence. Allah's absolute existence. And therefore, you exist because of Him. So inside of you is the God DNA. Now what does this mean? This means all of the sifat and asma of Allah are also dormant inside of you. This is why we know universal truth. Lying is wrong. Even a child, when a child lies, you can see his face go red. 2-year-old, 3-year-old, what does he know about society or she know about society? The fact is, there's certain things. Compassion is a good thing. Whether you're in Brazil, or you're in America, or you're in Canada, or you're sitting in the North Pole, or you're in some desert in Africa, the fact is compassion, kindness, love, all of these things are inside of us. And so for this reason, all of humanity benefit from this. You don't need to be a Muslim to understand goodness. Why? Because you contain that God DNA inside of yourself. An atheist doesn't need to really believe in God for him to actually be believing in God. Because when he goes out or she goes out, they beautify themselves because God is Jamal. And when they see some oppression taking place, they stand up for that oppression. Why? Because God is just, and God is compassionate, and God is kind. What that atheist doesn't realize is they're mimicking God without knowing it. This is the beauty. Everything around you, you can see God. The problem is, though, that our life restricts us. We only see things through a particular parameter. We don't open up our eyes. And most of us are confused. And most of us don't know the truth. Look, Amir al-Mu'mineen says something. I've said this before, and I'll say it here again. Amir al-Mu'mineen says, he says, look, at Kumaila, time is going to come where you'll find so much darkness, butlan, batil, everywhere. In the time of the Prophet, he says, there's one haqq, there's one batil. Akhir al-zaman will be that time. You'll see many butlan, see many batil, one haqq. And you'll see even within this faith, one person says something, his argument is going to be convincing, your children are going to be misguided, somebody else comes forward, says something else. You can see within one 20-day period of Muharram, you can have two people come onto the minbar, say completely 180 things, and everybody still says, wow. Why? Confusion. If your children are confused, and if you're confused, today, darkness falls. And this darkness only accelerates before the last days. You know, you go back 20 years ago when you see there was more calmness than there is now. As darkness and confusion falls, what happens is the calmness of the heart goes. Anxiety falls on a community. Problems befall a community. Spiritual depression befalls a community. Pain and suffering falls on a community. Tell me, we're so much more technologically advanced, but if you look at your grandparents' generations, they had very little, but they were happy with very little. It's because we're moving away. We're moving away. The further we get away from the Imam, remember, 1100 years goes to 1200 to 1300 years. The more we're separated from that Imam, the more we suffer. Why do you suffer? Lack of light. The further light is goodness. Nur, Allahu nuru samawati wal ard. Allah is also the source of goodness. So you're moving away from goodness. How do you move back to that goodness? Why has Allah saved His religion through the dhikr of Muhammad and Al Muhammad, especially through the dhikr of Sayyid al-Shuhada? If Sayyid al-Shuhada was that mizan that saved Islam, even today he's that mizan that saves Islam. This is why, what is he? Misbah al-Huda was Safinatun Najat. In a dark night, the candle that shines, that shows you the way, is Sayyid al-Shuhada. This is why these 10 days are important. And I know people have been telling me, people are sitting in their houses with their families. They're sitting there, they're observing these 10 nights. They're watching, they're crying, they're mourning together. It's very important you do this. Let me give you a tradition I was looking at today. It's a profound tradition. Had it not been for this COVID-19, I wouldn't have understood this tradition. Imam says a time will come where you'll see natural disasters, earthquakes. Disasters take place. At that stage, when you see more of this happening, gladden the heart of Fatima alayhi salam. How do you gladden a heart? When you cry for Sayyid al-Shuhada. Now come 4.5, 5 months later, COVID-19, natural disaster taking place. What is the solution? Go back and see when Mirza Shirazi, when that waba spread in Iraq and Iran, what hukum did he give? He said every single household begin to recite ziyarat Ashra. Even the Sunnis of Baghdad said, why aren't the Shias dying? We're all dying here, why aren't they dying? What's the secret? Ziyarat Ashura. Many Sunnis in Kavame and Samarra began to recite Ziyarat Ashura. Purpose saves you. So in this way, Hadith is saying here, when you see this increase, cry for Hussein. Look, in those days, when our grandparents recited Ziyarat Ashura, tears would come in their eyes. Today we're on our iPhones reciting Ziyarat Ashura, chatting away, talking to somebody. What's the milak? Tears. So now think of the philosophy. What 5 days ago I was thinking, how are we going to do an entire Ashra? Staring at a camera. It's difficult. It's not easy. The hardest thing to do is to connect to a community that's not in front of you. It's only wilaya and tawfiq from Allah and lutf of the Imam, the dua of Zahara, that we as a global community are connecting with one another. Otherwise, it's impossible to connect to hearts. This is what the miracle of Hussein ibn Ali is. It isn't the miracle of any one person. It's the miracle of Hussein. And you know what Sayyid al-Shuhada symbolizes? Sayyid al-Shuhada symbolizes his mother. And his mother's dua is what carries you. Look, you tell me, 50, 60, 70 years of your life, maybe more, from the very beginning of your life, you've been coming to the majlis of Imam Hussein. Your mother taught you. Even when she was sick, she still brought you to the majlis of Imam Hussein. You brought your children. You brought your grandchildren. This majlis of Imam Hussein is so powerful. Every single year you hear this. Rasulullah, when Imam Hussein was born, begins to cry. Ya Rasulullah, why are you crying? Story's in front of you. I'm going to take the khulasa of the story. Message was, Hussein will be slaughtered on the plains of Karbala. So that broken-hearted mother, child in her hand, says, Father, are you going to be there? No. Abul Hassan going to be there? No. Hassan going to be there? No. Am I going to be there? No. So now she begins to cry more. Why? Who's going to cry over my son? Who's going to cry over my son? Inshallah, you never experience this. I've seen with my own eyes a young son die, and that mother hasn't got the will to live anymore. Overnight she becomes aged. I remember a number of years ago, a very famous alim was with me at the time. It's a very famous khatib. It's the biggest khatib at the moment in the Urdu language. And we were together, we were going from Kadhimiya to Samara. There was a bomb blast. He was telling me this not too long ago. Somebody phoned his mother to say that there's been a bomb blast. I think your son may have been in that blast. He told me, he said that for 5 minutes my mother's eyesight went. He said at that moment I understood what Layla must have been feeling when the news came that Ali Akbar has been killed. She couldn't get up. Eyesight went. That's a mother. It's painful. It's not easy. You know what Rasulullah says to Zahra? He says, sister's daughter Fatima alayhi salam, Allah will create a nation to cry over your Hussein. That dua of Zahra is you. Do you know why it's important, therefore, for us to come together? Because your energy is important. Your wilaya is important. It takes the entire majlis to al-Ma'raj. It's not the kamal of one person. Meaning us, our fallible people, no. Yes, it's the kamal of the infallible. But that's why we come together. You know when people message and say, recite more masaib, more musibah. It's very difficult when you're looking through a lens. If only you were here. All of you are watching. If only you were here. If only we could mourn again, together. You know, I'd heard many a time. I believed it because it's written, but I didn't understand it. You know what that was? That how Gharib is the Mahdi, who recites to himself and cries to himself and beats his chest to himself. I never understood this until today. Before I came to record this, tears were in my eyes thinking, we still have one or two people here. And even then you think to yourself, you still feel ghareeb. Why? Because Masaib is recited when the Shia are together. They console one another. They cry together. They hug one another. They beat their chest together. Why? Because we become one body, like the hadith says, to mourn over Hussein. Allah remove this waba quickly, so that the first thing we can do is we can come together to cry for Sayyid al-Shuhada. Haqq of Hussein is that we come together and to cry over him. Haqq is such. Thank Allah for this tawfiq though. What an amazing tawfiq that at least we can still cry for Imam Hussein. We can still come and mourn for Imam Hussein. What a tawfiq. I can only thank Zahra alayhi salam that she's given us the opportunity to come and sit here to recite and for you to listen. This is a tawfiq. Don't underestimate this. You know why? It's Noor. It's Noor. You know what Noor does? Noor removes blockages. You know what we said? What does darkness do? Darkness takes you away from goodness. When you follow your nafs, when you follow your ego and your desires, and the other thing is when you hurt people, when you hurt others, when you break their heart, you go far away from the wilayat of Allah. Then what happens? Internally you begin to suffer. Internally things begin to eat you up. So what is Imam Hussein? He's that energy. When you cry over him, you destroy all of those blockages, moving fast on Sirat al-Mustaqim back to the light, back to the way of the Ahlul Bayt. This is why this Muharram is important. Let these blockages not prevent us from moving in the direction we need to. What is Imam Hussein? Look, yesterday we said something. We said that we need to understand in its true form what imamat is. Today we don't understand what imamat is in its true form. We talk about the imam having rights over us, awla, mawla. But what is the imam? We said three things. This is why the imam needs to be followed. Wajibul ita'a. When the imam says something, you do it. Three things he has. What is it? One, his ilm is naqis, his ilm is kamil. When a person, why do you do taqleed for? You go to that person who has more knowledge because you know that there's more chances of being correct. That person who's wasl to ilmullah, ilm of Allah, imagine. That person in and of itself who has ilm al-dunni. That person who has Masaf Fatima. That person who has Ruh al-Qudus with him. That person who has the tabarrukat of the Anbiya. When that person says something, his knowledge is kamil, one thing. Second thing which is important about him, remember, what is he? He doesn't have any khata, there's no mistake. He's ma'soom, Allah protects him. Therefore, whatever he does is Allah. He's Allah's manifestation on earth. And it's important to remember that. Whatever he does, when Amir al-Mu'mineen talks, Lisanullah comes into play. When he lifts his hand, Yadullah comes into play. When he looks at something, Aynullah comes into play. Why? Because Allah doesn't have a body. But the physical implementation of the Amr of Allah is Amir al-Mu'mineen. This is why the Quran says certain people have bought the Amr of Allah. Who are they? Ahlul Bayt. Quran is there. Look at it and see. Sunni Shia traditions boast that person who bought Amr Allah, who was what? That person who was what? Amir al-Mu'mineen. Amr of Allah is bought by the Imam. You wouldn't understand Tawheed because you don't understand that which is La Mahdud, had it not been for the Imam. This is why in Usul Kafi, the sixth Imam says, had it not been for us, you wouldn't have understood Tawheed. Why is that? To understand something requires some type of knowledge. Otherwise, without knowledge, you can't understand. In logic, they say you need some ilm. Something needs to be ma'aloom for you to go to that which is unknown. Something needs to be known to go into the unknown. What is that thing which is known to you? You have a bit of the Imam known to you. And this is why they say, "Man mata wa lam ya'arif, Imam az-zamanihi mata mitatin jahiliya." Why do you say that? Without ma'arif of the Imam, you're a jahil. You're a person who has no knowledge of Allah. Why is that? It's through the wasila of the hujjat of Allah that you get to Allah itself. Otherwise, Allah is ghaibul ghayub. He's so hidden that you wouldn't be able to understand Him. And if He was to become apparent, then you would burn. So therefore, it requires a medium. And that medium is Muhammad and ala Muhammad. Who teaches you? Rasulullah teaches you. Who teaches you? Amir al-Mu'mineen teaches you. What do they teach you? They give you ma'rifah. They take you to the light. Remember one thing. Why are these 10 days of Muharram important? 2 reasons. One reason is this. Because your ma'rifah increases. What is ma'rifah? Ma'rifah doesn't come just by reading books. Knowledge which is crammed in the mind or the aql is not true knowledge. True knowledge is the nur which shines from the heart. So therefore, for you to shine, for nur to come into your heart, requires you to be practical, amali. Without being practical is impossible. This is why the first stage of irfan, first stage of ma'rifah is to help other people. In fact, let me put it again. If you want to become godlike, learn to share unconditionally. What does that mean? That means to do things for other people without wanting anything in return. And when you do that, only then do you move towards understanding what godliness is. And this is something that your imams have done. If you look at what they've done, their godliness is what? That they do things unconditionally. Have you not seen these traditions where the imam give wealth to people? Let me give you a story. Maybe it may help you to understand. Imam never hold a debt on their shoulders. One day Imam Sajjad is walking in the street of Medina. He's walking. Tradition says that he had grain with him. A drought had come over Medina. So he comes, he covers his face. In the way that Amir al-Mu'mineen would cover his face. You know why? When you do something unconditionally, it's not about the that. It's about Allah. Covers his face. Remember one thing, if you want to be famous truly, work for Allah, He'll make you famous. All the PR that you do for your own self eventually will die away. When you're dead, nobody will remember you. But there are people today who are living. And those people who are living today, even after their death, is because they've connected with Sayyid al-Shuhada. Look and see, how many Maraji have gone? You wouldn't even know half of them who have gone over the last 1100 years. But you look at those people who have done something for Sayyid al-Shuhada, and they're still alive today. Some of them don't even need to be anything big. Some of them are not even scholars. Look at some of those people who are famous for reciting. You would beat your chest. They're not in this world anymore. What do you find? People still remember them. Those people who've come on the mimbar, there were many ulama, urafas, scholars. People have gone. But those people who do dhikr of Muhammad and ala Muhammad, they stay alive. Why? You're connected to something. This is why, if you want to live forever, is this. But anyhow, let's come back to what I was saying, to complete it. They say at that stage, Imam comes out. When the Imam comes out, he starts distributing wheat to people. At that stage, one man comes forward. He says, Ali ibn al-Hussein, can I take some grain as well? He says, of course you can. He says, I don't think you recognized me. He says, how can I not recognize you? You're the killer of my father. Take it. Why? Why? Banu Hashim have a quality. They gained this quality from their grandmother. That quality is the quality of being merciful. Look, if Rasulullah is rahmat lil alameen, what does he say about Fatima alayhi salam? Abiha. You know what is? It's not just mother biologically. Is root. Is foundations. Alright? The foundations for Rasulullah, he's saying when he says Abiha. Meaning what? The foundations of Risalat is what? Fatima alayhi salam. Look, I mentioned a tradition yesterday. I didn't complete it. It's dangerous if I don't complete it. The reason being is without understanding it, it can misguide people. وَلَوْلَا فَاطِمَةَ لَمَا خَلَقْتُكُمَا. Many people say we don't understand this. Hadith Qudsi, but how is it possible? When it starts off by saying, Ya Ahmad, لَوْلَاكَ لَمَا خَلَقْتُ الْأَفْلَاقِ وَلَوْلَا عَلِي لَمَا خَلَقْتُكُ وَلَوْلَا فَاطِمَةَ لَمَا خَلَقْتُكُمَا. How's it possible? How's this possible? Answer is very simple. People say, does that mean that Rasulullah is less than Fatima alayhi salam? No. His maqam is greater. He was the first in creation. But if it wasn't for Fatima, there would be no Amir al-Mu'mineen, there would be no Rasulullah, there would be no world. Why is that? Answer comes, Majlisi mentions, Allama Majlisi. He mentions, look, from the manifestation of Rasulullah, the Arsh was made the highest level of creation. Arsh holds two things. Ilm of Allah, Qudra of Allah. Both of these things are required for creation to become creation. You see, when Allah says kun, that's all He says. Kaf, noon, kun, fayakun. What is kun? Kaf stands for kamal, perfection. That kamal is found within insan kamil. Noor represents, noon represents noor. When kamal and noor come together, that's when the kun happens. What does the kamal symbolize? Haqiqat al-Muhammadiyya. What does the noor symbolize? Fatimah al-Zahra. When both of these haqiqas come together, kun, creation comes into being. That's Allah's kun. Allah mentions the words come. Remember, Allah doesn't require words. Words in itself is a creation. Allah is above that. But when Allah whispers the words, kaf and noon are powerful, all of creation comes from this. And that kaf and noon is a challenge. Remember what we said yesterday. On the one hand you have Taghut. On the one hand you have what? Allahu waliyul ladhina amanu yukhrijuhum min adh-dhulumati ila an-nur. On the one hand you have Taghut. The kun has two sides to it. When Adam looks at the kun, he sees Kamal and Nur. When Shaitan looks at the kun, what does he see? He sees Kufr and Nar. What's the difference between Nar and Nur? Nar also gives light, but Nar burns everything. Nur also gives light, but it gives existence as well. On the other hand, Kamal, what is Kamal? Kamal is perfection, but Kufr is when you hide that perfection. Why? Two sides of one kun. So remember, you have a choice in life. Either you can be with light or you can be with darkness. And the line is fine. The line is fine. This is why when you look at someone like Shaitan, you think Shaitan wasn't a muwahid? Shaitan believes in one God. He understands that one God. When he calls Allah, he says Razik and Rabb and Allah, Ya Ilahi. He calls Allah by these names because he understands God. The problem with Shaitan is what? The problem with Shaitan is his arrogance that destroys him. This is why it says, Maqam ayat. Allah shows his ayat to people first. At that maqam you can gain power. But that doesn't necessarily mean that you're purified. Look at the Quran and see. What do you recite every Friday? يُسَبِّحُ لِلَّهِ مَا فِي السَّمَاوَاتِ وَمَا فِي الْأَرْضِ الْمَلِكِ الْقُدُّوسِ الْعَزِيزِ الْحَكِيمِ هُوَ الَّذِي بَعَثَ فِي الْأُمِّيِّينَ رَسُولًا مِّنْهُمْ يَتْلُو عَلَيْهِمْ آيَاتِهِ وَيُزَكِّيهِمْ وَيُعَلِّمُهُمُ الْكِتَابَ وَالْحِكْمَةَ. First thing ayat come, then وَيُزَكِّيهِمْ come. After that, وَيُعَلِّمُهُمُ الْكِتَابَ وَالْحِكْمَةَ. To go directly to the book where that tazkiyah destroys you. Why is that? Because you're not pure. The lens isn't pure to be able to see the Quran. And what purifies you? Tears. What are those tears? Shed for Hussein. On the night of Ashura then, when you read the Quran, you see the Quran is more nur to you than it would have been before Ashura. Why is that? Because your heart is purified to receive the nur of the Quran. Understand this. It's not something small. Purify yourself then. See, everything that Allah says in the Quran, there's a reason behind it. Shaitan was shown the signs. He worshipped, so he was raised. But there was a problem with Shaitan. He was unable to destroy his nafs. This is why what Hussein's majlis teaches these 10 days is ma'arifah, not ilm. Sometimes ilm makes you arrogant. You've seen some of our professors, right, in university, how arrogantly they walk. What have they got? Factual knowledge. Have they any ma'arifah? Not if you're arrogant. Ma'rifah humbles you. Shall I tell you how much it humbles you? Let me tell you what your Imam says. Which Imam? Imam Sajjad. I swear, if you look at some of the stuff he says, only an Imam and Ma'soom can say this. In one of the traditions he says, Allah, do not make me ghafil of you, that when I breathe in, I think I'm going to breathe out again. This is what Mullah Sadra says, wujood fakhri. A person's wujood which is so poor in front of Allah. What does Rasulullah say? He says, I'm the poorest in front of Allah. When you understand your ontological poverty is when Allah makes you ghani. Otherwise you can't become ghani without understanding your poverty in front of Allah. If Allah wants to make you Khalifatullah, He first shows you how poor you are. True knowledge humbles you, gives you humility. Without that, it's impossible to get anywhere. Therefore, what is Muharram therefore? What are these 10 days? Look, there's a huge task ahead. Two things I'll say to you in this time. Very important. In these 10 days, number one, learn to share. Share unconditionally. Share with people. And I'll explain to you why in a minute. Secondly, understand quietness. Quiet. Understand the maqam of sukut, as they say. Maqam of samt. In these 10 days, try and speak very less, because over 100 sins are committed by the tongue. Let me give you some modern day examples. I still remember Ayatollah Bahjat. As we mentioned him in the last couple of nights, I'll mention him now. Even when you went to see istikhara from him, he would either go this, meaning yes, this meaning no, this meaning middle. He wouldn't talk. Why? He was at the maqam of silence. That in itself is a maqam. Ayatollah Abdul Karim al-Kashmiri, people asked him, they said, my own teacher would say to me, he said, whenever I went into the majlis of Ayatollah Kashmiri, it felt like a graveyard. Here's a man who didn't say anything. You could see he was a mujassim of Tawheed. When he opened his eyes, even when it was dark, it was like light comes out of his eyes. And this is no exaggeration. When somebody says that to you, they mean it. They mean it. Some of the urafa, even when it's dark, when they open their eyes, the light of the eyes brightens the entire thing. You know when you hear about the tradition, for example, in Sunni tradition that says, Aisha says, that at night time Rasulullah's nur of his forehead was such that it would light in such a way that I could find a needle. That's no exaggeration. Imagine what that light is. When Sayyid al-Shuhada comes, his forehead is light, his neck is light. Imagine Musa when he comes, his hand is light. When we talk about these urafa of Ala Muhammad, the awliya, when I say when they open their eyes, light comes out, literally it lights up. And if not, I've seen myself with my own eyes in Masjid-e-Fatimiyah. The year was 2007, maybe I was coming out. Ayatollah Bahjat had finished his prayers. A man who I'd never seen before, Sheikh, comes out. In front of me this was. I was standing in Ghuzar Khan, I was looking up, the sun was in front of me. This man comes, he opened his eyes, the light from his eyes was brighter than the sun, was blinding me. Those are people, I didn't know who he was, I never saw him again. The only other time I saw him was in Hujjatiyah. And there in front of me and another friend of ours, whose name I won't mention, because he asked me not to, both of us saw this person do Tayyal al-Ard, went disappeared into the ground. Whether I should be saying these things or not, you can edit it later. The fact of the matter is this. I forget when we only have one or two people that we've actually got a global audience. Maybe perhaps these stories are there to be hidden in another time. So I'll stop right there, I don't want to say anything more. The only thing I'm a sinner. But what we've seen in front of us of the awliya of the Ahlul Bayt, imagine what the awliya of Allah are like. Imagine what Ahlul Bayt are like. So Ayatollah Kashmiri got to that maqam, he would say, silence. He didn't speak. Allama Tabatabai, have you seen him? Tabatabai. Have you seen him? You may not have, he died in 81. But those people who had, he wouldn't say anything, silence. You asked him a question, he replied, silence. That silence opens up 70 different streams of nur in your heart. Look, you can't be silent always. And it's difficult to be silent in your house. You have small children, you've got a husband, you've got a wife. It's difficult. But for 10 days, control your tongue and you see how much nur comes into your heart. Control it. Work on it. So look, these aren't small matters. You can change your entire destiny if you utilize these nights. There's two things more I want to say. Time is not on our side and time is ticking away. Two things I'll say. Sayyid al-Shuhada, his name in and of itself has so much power. Revolutions come because of his name. Look, when I say Ya Hussein, you feel an energy inside of yourself. Your entire body starts to goosebump. Ya Hussein. Powerful. 1400 years have gone. Nor have you seen Sayyid al-Shuhada. Nor do you know how tall he is. Nor do you know what color eyes he has. Nor do you know what his favorite dish is. But today, Hussein, 1400 years later, brings you to tears when the death of your own grandfather doesn't bring you to tears like this. Your father passes away. God forbid one day it's going to happen to all of us. You cry, you remember him, but when it comes to Hussein, you break down year in, year out. You don't know Hussein. In fact, we don't know anything about him. What is it though? It's the connection. Why? People came and they said to Sayyid al-Shuhada, Ibn Abbas came. He said, Mawla, why are you going to Karbala for? Why are you going to Kufa for? He said, why are you going to Kufa for? Don't you know Ahl Iraq? How they treated your father? How the Ahl Kufa treated your father? Why are you going there for? Look at what they did to your father and your brother. Imam Hussein is Imam Ma'soom. He doesn't need guidance from somebody else. He knows what he's doing. What is Imam Hussein doing? Didn't Imam Hussein know? If the people of Kufa were so loyal to Imam Hussein, after the Shahada of Imam Hussein, they would have come and given bay'ah to Imam Zain al-Abidin. Who did? Imam Hussein knew that. It wasn't because of that. Tomorrow nobody can say that I refused their invitation. No, more than that, Imam Hussein knew that he was going to change the hearts of the people. Inqilab in Shi'ism is not about raising a sword. Inqilab comes from qalb, qalaba, to change the heart of the people. This is the way that Imam Hussein works. When we talk about the 12th Imam, Imam doesn't come with a sword, starts chopping heads off left, right and center. This is not the way that Rasulullah does things. Rasulullah is who? Rahmat lil Alameen. What does Imam do? He creates inqilab, but he changes your heart. That's what he does. Idea is to change the heart of people. The only way you can change the heart of people is if you're compassionate. You have to show compassion. You have to be compassionate, without which it's not going to happen. So therefore, first thing I want you to do in these 10 days, look, I wish I could go actually start the actual topic that we wanted to, but the foundations before we can start, inshallah, we have 5 days. Requires this. First stage is this. First stage. Compassion. Share with other people. Share as much as you can do. From today onwards, whenever you eat, offer it to somebody else. If you see somebody in trouble, don't let them go without helping them. But the biggest help you can do is not to judge anyone, is not to talk badly of anyone. Remember, what does the Imam alayhi salam says? Your 6th Imam says, 7 huquq. 7 huquq that a believer has over the other believer. If you don't fulfill this, you're outside of the wilayat of the Ahlul Bayt. One of them is what you like for yourself, like for the other. I don't like anyone to backbite about me. I don't backbite about it. I shouldn't backbite. I don't and I shouldn't backbite about anybody else. I shouldn't cheat anybody else. I shouldn't lie about anybody else. I shouldn't hurt anybody else. This is not just a lesson for you. It's also a lesson for me. Remember, if I'm not changing as well on this minbar, then there's no way that I can present this and expect you to change. We can only try. And we're all trying. First thing, therefore, sharing, giving. Second thing, try and observe as much silence. You know what that means? Get off your phone. Put your phone down. For the next 10 days, for as long as you can, the world isn't collapsing. Even business deals take time. What are you going to be, Bill Gates? Even Bill Gates doesn't spend 24 hours on his phone. Why? There's something known as mental well-being, psychological well-being as well. You're destroying your well-being when you're always on the phone. Do you remember the Apple founder who didn't even give his son or any of his children any of his toys? Why? He's clever. We're scattering our children's minds all over the place. We're scattering our focus is gone, our concentration is gone. It's lucky. There's two communities in the world which are quite lucky. One, the Jewish community who has Sabbath, that they switch off their phone for 25 hours. And the other, the Shia community, because at least for 1 hour in a majlis, you switch your phone off. After that, everything is phone. Switch off. When you switch off externally, only then can internally open up. Allah wants to talk to you. You don't allow Allah to talk to Him. He wants to talk to you. For 1 minute, switch off and allow God to talk to you. If you focus for 1 minute, just close your eyes and focus on Imam Hussein in your heart, which we call muraqabah. You know how important muraqabah is? So important muraqabah is that some of my friends have said, those people are Ahl muraqabah. One person once said, he said that when I stopped for a couple of days doing muraqabah, Sayyid al-Shuhada came into my dream to say, why have you stopped doing muraqabah on me? Now look, some of you can ask, what is muraqabah? We don't have time to go into it, time is flying. I'll just say one thing. It's a form of a meditation which allows your heart to connect to that which you focus upon. It's what Allama Tabatabai did, Said Ali Qadi Marhum did, Ayatollah Bahjat, they all did muraqabah. Allama says, he says, that person who does the most muraqabah in the daytime sees the most mukashifat at night time. You can ask me, say, look, why are you talking about all of these stories for? You know why? Because it gives you hope. People say, well, we can't get to the Imams. Okay, I'm giving you examples of fallible people. And I'm giving it on purpose. I don't like to talk about these things. Some of these are secrets. Because these people have passed away, left this world, and I'm mentioning these. I don't gain anything by mentioning them. The only reason I do is for us to take a lesson that there are people today. Otherwise we get lost. We think, okay, there's so much corruption in the world, there's no point even trying. Try. There are people today living who, when they say salam to the zarih of the Imam, the reply comes. It's not just 1500 years ago, 1400 years ago, 1300 years ago, time of Bani Israel, or 100 years ago, or your grandparents' age. It's actually in this age as well. One alim says, he says, I went to the ziyarah of Sayyid al-Shuhada. I was walking from Iran, going through Iraq. On the way, I bumped into a farmer. The farmer said to me, he said, look, where are you going? It was on the banks of the Furat. Now remember one thing. There are two rivers in Iraq. One, the Dajla, which is salty. And it's the river of those people who are against the Ahlul Bayt. Furat is sweet. The water of Furat, the people around it are people with wilaya in their hearts. This is why when a child is born, it's mustahab to give him a little bit of water from the Furat and to give him a little bit of khaq, turba of Sayyid al-Shuhada. When Abbas looked into Furat, Furat became Furat. Furat is the water of wilaya for the people of Ahl wilaya. Anyhow, long story short is this. This alim says, I was walking and I bumped into a farmer and he said to me, where are you going? He said, in those days there was a lot of Nasibi type people in Iraq. So he got a bit worried. So that man replied, so the alim says, look, he says in a very short word, he says, look, I'm going to the ziyarah of Hussein. So he looks up at him and he says, what benefit are you going to get from going to the ziyarah of Hussein? So the alim says, I took a step back. So I said to him, no, I believe when I go and say salam, it's wajib to reply. So the man says, does Hussein reply? He says, yes. He says, show me. So the alim says, I got startled. He says, at this point, I didn't know who this farmer was. The farmer looked up and said, okay, can I try and see what happens? Alim says, Bismillah. Farmer gets up with full concentration, says, Assalamu alayka ya Aba Abdullah. This alim says, I witnessed the reply coming from the mountains. He says, at that point then, this farmer looks towards me and he says, why don't you say salam? I looked towards Karbala, I said, Mawla, I have a respect as well. Please hold my respect. He says, I gave salam, reply did come back, but not in the way that this farmer did. At that moment, he taught me a lesson. Lesson is ikhlas. Sincerity is very powerful. Look, in the next coming nights, we'll go into it. I don't want to open up too many chapters. Otherwise, it's going to be very difficult for us to stay on topic and to complete everything that we want to complete. The final thing I will say is this. Time is flying. 40 minutes or so have already gone. Or maybe more than that. I'll give you one more story. And that's it. I'll complete today's session. You know why Ibrahim is known as Khalilullah? Friend of Allah. Khalil means two things. One, friend. The other, some of the scholars say, comes from takhallul, permeation. Allah permeated Ibrahim's wujud when he became Imam. Inni ja'aluka lin-nasi imama. But let's go with this. Khalil. How does Ibrahim become Khalil, friend of Allah? They say Ibrahim had three qualities. And these three qualities, if a Shia doesn't have, then they're not a very good Shia. Three qualities. First quality is this. Remember, if you want to know how to come into the wilayah of the Ahlul Bayt, this first quality is the most important. They say Ibrahim was generous. Generosity, remember on the first or the second night we said there are 5 things if a person possesses it, even if they're not from us, still hell is haram on them. Like Hakim al-Ta'i. 5 things if a person possesses. One of them was ghayra we looked at, but one of them is generosity. You know what Ibrahim would do? Ibrahim never ate alone. He would make sure that there was someone there to eat with him. Why? Some of our ulama says the difference between haywan and insan is that insan eats together, haywan eats alone. You should never eat alone. Even when you're at work, share something with somebody. Sitting in the car wanting to eat, offer something to someone. At least offer. At least offer something. Ibrahim never ate alone. Didn't matter whether a person was kafir, mushrik, whatever the person was, the fact is a human being is a human being. 7 billion of us learn to share, learn to be generous. Never ate alone. Why? Not only is it makruh, but there's some side effects as well for a person who eats alone. This is why you find tradition on this. Khura Amali mentions a tradition. Sahib Wasail. He says, why was Yaqub separated from Yusuf? For so many years, 34 years, one tradition says, 40 years, another tradition says. He says, because one day, a beggar came to his door, knocked on his door. Yaqub used to eat at a particular time. After that, stopped eating. When he opened the door, the beggar said to him, do you have any food to eat? I'm hungry. He says, I don't have anything to give you. Genuinely, he didn't. That day, this waliullah goes into the forest and he begins to cry. He says, Allah, I went to your Nabi and your Nabi didn't give him anything. Tarqa awla took place. The responsibility is that if anybody asks you, don't ever let them go empty-handed. What happened therefore? If you would have done that, there would be no sin on you. But because Yaqub was a Nabi, Tarqa awla took place, Allah separated Yusuf from him. Imagine. This is why when your ma'rifah increases, the trial and tribulation increases as well. If you think that you're going to get free ma'rifah, that's not the case. The only way you can continuously get free ma'rifah is if you continuously cry for Sayyid al-Shuhada. That's what saves us all the time. But remember, generosity is important. This is why they say, if anyone ever comes to you, they ask for help, you're unsure, just give them something small. Don't let anybody ever let them go empty-handed. Because the tradition says, if a believer comes to you, and I'm talking about non-believers, don't let them go empty-handed. Hadith says, even if a believer comes to you and asks you, and if you don't help them, one tradition says, bala befalls you. And if you give to anyone who asks you, Allah removes 70 bala from you. So imagine, one, he became Khalil because he was giving. Two, he had tawakkul in Allah. You've heard of the story, right? He's being chucked into the fire. Chucked into the fire, Jibreel comes. Jibreel comes to say to them, Ibrahim, do you need any help? Now imagine, what would you say? Of course I need help, I've been chucked into the fire. What does he say? Not from you. He says, the one who created, that's the one who I need help from. The minute that happened, what does Allah say? Kuni bardan wa salama. Why? Remember one thing, this doesn't come naturally. You've got to work to get to that maqam. You can turn around to me today and say, how's it possible for my iman to increase like Ibrahim's? It can't increase like that. You've got to work on it step by step. Don't worry if you have doubts. Doubting is okay. Just take the tawasul of Ahlul Bayt and move on. Start doing practical work. Keep on doing the good work and you see, eventually a time will come where yaqeen will come into your heart. Just because you don't have it now, doesn't mean you give up on it. It means you continuously try. Remember one thing, Allah is Rahman and He's Rahim. Both is there. There's a third quality as well. I don't have time to go into it. Inshallah, we'll continue it tomorrow. The main reason why we're here today is to gladden the heart of Fatima alayhi salam. Look, I wish I could recite. If we were all together, then perhaps we could have recited longer. I just want you for 1 second to close your eyes. Go to Bain al-Haramain tonight. Look to the right, Sayyid al-Shuhada. Look to the left, Abul Fadl al-Abbas. What would you do if you were sitting in Bain al-Haramain tonight? We've come to our 5th night. Tonight, I want to talk about 2 small children. Tonight, know something. There are 3 people in Karbala or from the followers of Imam Hussein whose entire nasl was cut after Karbala. One of them, Muslim bin Aqil. There's no one today to call him father. One of them, Rabab, she had 2 children. One of them is sleeping in Damascus, and one of them is sleeping on his father's chest. Third person is Sayyidah Zainab. Look, today, remember one thing, we're not together. We all need to cry because we all need to do the haqq of Zahra. We all need to fulfill that haqq. When we're in a majlis, there may be 2 people, they compensate for all of us. Their baqa is enough for all of our du'as to be answered. Today we're alone. Each one of us are ghareeb from Hussein. In your own ghurba today, don't cry because I'm saying cry. Cry because today Zahra wants your tears. Let me tell you something. Have you ever seen a woman who can't have children? I have. You know, when small children come running, you can see her face. She wants to be happy, but you can see her put a hand on her heart because she has no children, she has no nasl. Now let me tell you something. If a woman has children, and those children are deprived from her, Imagine whenever she sees somebody else's children, what's she going to say? She's going to remember her son. She's going to remember her daughter. The pain that goes from a mother's heart, you don't know. I don't know. Only women know. Why? Because they're mothers. There are 3 daughters who are very close to their fathers. Look, I'm going to recite slowly. It's within your nasib now if tears come into your eyes or not. Remember, as soon as the tears come, I want you to do something. I want you to do dua. Know that your dua will be accepted. This is the time of istijabat when dua is in your eyes. Do dua. When those tears come, you'll see somebody from ghaib says Ameen. 3 daughters. You know who the one daughter is? One daughter's name is Fatima. She's 5 years old. Her mother has died. Her father goes to Taif. They stone him from head to toe, he's covered in blood. When he's coming back home, he knows in his heart, my daughter's a yatima. The mother's not there. If my daughter sees me head to toe in blood, what's going to happen to her? And you know what? Zahra's waiting on the door, waiting for her father to come back. From a distance, she sees her father covered in head to toe in blood. Her father's feeling embarrassed. Zahra goes running. She was so small. She puts her arms around his knees because she wasn't tall enough to put her arms around his neck. And at that moment she says, Father, come down. Father looks down. She takes her small hands. She wipes the tears from his eyes, the blood from his face, and says, Father, if my mother Khadija's not with you, then Zahra is with you. Look, I wish I could recite more. Let me say one more thing. Through the wasila of what I'm about to say, may Allah accept all of your du'as. They say when Khadija was leaving this world, Malikatul Arab had given all of her money for the sake of Rasulullah. What does a parent want? A parent just wants that their children have life, that their children are happy, even on their deathbed. They want that. She calls Rasulullah. She was smiling. She says, Ya Rasulullah, I'm leaving this world. Hungry and thirsty she was. Suffering and pain she was. But she was saying something. She was saying, what's going to happen to my daughter after me? And she says something. She says, marry my daughter to the son of Abu Talib. For as long as Ali is there, I know my daughter will be protected. Rasulullah can't say anything. She asks him, she says, Ya Rasulullah, tell me what's going to happen to my daughter. Rasulullah says, Khadija, look through my 2 fingers and see for yourself. As Khadija looks through the 2 fingers, what does she see? She looks up and she says, Ya Rasulullah, who's this woman surrounded by all of these men, standing in the middle of what looks like a court? Khadija, look again and see. Again she looks. She says, Ya Rasulullah, I don't understand. Why does she have one hand on her rib for and one hand on her back for? Khadija, look again and see. She says, Rasulullah, I can't recognize her. Eye is bruised. Look, I can't say anymore. One daughter. Second daughter, Hussein also had a small daughter who would sleep on the chest of Hussein. I'm not going to narrate all of it because it's too painful. Some of you won't be able to take it. And our elder who is here, they won't be able to take it. I'm just going to say one thing to you. You know what that one thing is? They say Imam Sajjad cried when in Sham. You know why he cried? When you go to the ziyarah of Sayyidah Ruqayyah, when you go there, Allah give all of you the tawfiq to go there. At the back of the ziyarah, when you read the ziyarah on the book, on the back there's a hadith. In that hadith it says this. It says when they were giving ghusl and kafan to Sakina, that small 4-year-old girl, I can't say all of it, I'm just going to say one thing. The women began to scream and they came running out. Imam Sajjad says, what happened? They say, what happened to this girl? Says, why? Says, when we tried to pour water over her hair was shredding. Her hair was shredding. Imam replied, he said, because Shimr would grab hold of her hair and pull her. Allah protect your daughters. Look, that's all I'm going to say. Generally, I would recite a lot more. I'm not going to say any more than that. I'm just going to come to one final daughter. You know what that daughter's name is? Who that daughter is? That daughter is Zainab. That daughter, who at the age of 5 and 6, in the morning, Amir al-Mu'mineen at Fajr time would grab her by the finger and take her walking around the sand. To the extent that she would say, "Father, my feet are swelling." Amir al-Mu'mineen with tears in his eyes would say, "Zainab, walk now. A time is going to come when they're going to make you parade in Kufa to Sham." Shall I continue? Just one more thing I'll say and that's it. Honestly, I can't say any more than that. One thing I'll say is this though. You two fathers who are in front of me have daughters. Your daughters are married. To this day, when your daughter has a problem, she phones you, right? Regardless of how weak you are. Abdul Muttalib says, have 10 sons, have 11 sons, have 12 sons, have one daughter. You know why? Your wives will marry off after your death if they're young enough. Your sons will separate your wealth. Your daughter's the one who's always going to remember you. You know who always remembered Rasulullah? Fatima did. Do you know who always remembered Sayyid al-Shuhada? Sakina did. You know for all of those years who remembered Amir al-Mu'mineen? Zainab did. The day when Zainab was sitting there with Amir al-Mu'mineen, Imam is leaving this world, Zainab begins to cry, Amir al-Mu'mineen begins to cry. He can't see his daughter crying. You know at that moment what happens? Let me narrate to you a tradition. I wasn't going to narrate this, but I'll narrate this. He whispered something into Sayyidah Zainab's ear that Zainab went quiet. Many years later, what he whispers comes to life. You know what that was? Look, I'm going to recite slowly, you do your dua. Remember this, daughter always remembers her father, whatever happens. They say the most difficult moment, Imam Sajjad says, he says, Asham. What was it about Sham that was so painful? Shall I tell you what it was? Sayyidah Zainab was sitting on the bazaar on the entrance. Shimmer was whipping her from the back. People were chucking hot water at her. Somebody was chucking rocks at her. Somebody was hitting stones at her. They say Imam Sajjad comes forward, says, "Aunt, I can't see you like this. Why don't you get up and go in for? I can't see you like this. Are you startled?" She says, "Sajjad, son, no, I'm not startled." She says, "Why don't you go in?" She says, "When my father was leaving this world, he whispered something into my ear. He says, Zainab, a time will come when they'll parade you through Bazaar-e-Sham. That bazaar will be very dangerous. It'll be very difficult for you. Zainab, don't ever feel that you're alone, Zainab. Wait for me. Your father will come to walk with you, Zainab." She replies, she says, "Sajjad, I'm waiting for my father to come so he can take me by the hand and take me into Bazaar-e-Sham." History doesn't say what happens, but all of a sudden, a daughter stands up and says, "Assalamu alayka, ya Amir al-Mu'min." Look, I can't recite anymore. I'm going to leave everything out. You can't take it, I can't recite it. Accelerating to that point. Night of Ashura comes. Sayyid al-Shuhada is going from tent to tent. He comes in front of a tent which brings tears into his eyes. What was that tent? Where was that person? Tent of Sayyidah Zainab. One mother is sitting with 2 of her sons. And she's saying just one thing. "You are the son of Ali Murtada?" You're the sons of Haydar al-Karrar, you're the sons of Ja'far al-Tayyar. Tomorrow a war is going to, a battle is going to happen. Sons, I want you to go forward and give your life. Sons, I know because you have the blood of Ja'far and Ali running through your veins that you're going to get to the Furat. But sons, remember something, you're going to be extremely thirsty. But no, Sakina's thirsty as well. Don't drink from that water. Know that if you're to drink from that water, on the day of judgment, I won't forgive you, sons. Imam is crying, tears are in his eyes. Ashura day comes. I'm going very quickly. Ashura day comes. Sayyidah Zainab says, sons, why haven't you gone and given your life? Uncle doesn't give us ijazah. Sayyidah Zainab comes forward. She says, brother, let my two sons go to the battlefield. They say both of those sons were so small that one Sayyid al-Shuhada put on the horse, the other Abul Fadl Abbas put on the horse. Two of these sons go to attack. I'm accelerating, going all the way to the end. Two of these sons attack. One goes into the qalb of the army, one goes into the heart of the army, the other one goes from the other side. When both of them are fighting, both of them are saying, remember what our mother said. Remember, we're going to get to the Furat. Both sons come to the Furat. In the tradition says, one man comes from the back, hits the sword on the own shoulder, own falls to the ground. Another one comes, Muhammad's head. Muhammad falls to the ground. Both of them call for their uncles. They say Sayyid al-Shuhada comes like a lion, comes onto the battlefield. Abul Fadl Abbas comes as well. Tradition says Sayyid al-Shuhada comes to the head of Muhammad, raises the head, puts it on his lap. You know, this young boy is shaking. His life is leaving him. And at that moment, with tears in his eyes, he looks up at his uncle, says, tell my mother I didn't drink, but I got to... Look, final thing I'll say is this. Look, I want to complete this, but my heart can't complete it. Now do your dua. 11th of Muharram comes. Zainab is leaving. She goes and does tawaf of the body of Sayyid al-Shuhada. She gives her wida to Sayyid al-Shuhada. She gives the wida to Abul Fadl Abbas. They say two small bodies were on the side. She was crying on every body. But as she passes on in Muhammad's bodies, she doesn't look in that direction. She clenches her fists, takes back her tears, doesn't look in that direction, but says, on in Muhammad al-Wida, and she begins to go. Kufa, Sham. Sham, they say when Yazid hands all the heads back, first head is a 6-month-old baby. Rabab comes forward, takes that head. Another head comes, Eventually Abbas's head comes, Kulthum comes and takes it. Sayyid al-Shuhada's head comes, Zainab comes and takes it, Sayyidah Zainab. They say two heads were on the side. One woman comes and says, has the mother of these two children died? Fidda looks up and says, no, Zainab is still here, don't say this. Zainab's the mother. Arba'in Sayyidah Zainab goes back. Again she goes to the grave of Hussein. Two small graves were there on the return. Again she clenches her fist, says al-Wida, doesn't look into that direction. Mother's a mother though. She goes back to Medina. She goes to the Prophet's grave. She goes to Zahra's grave. I'm going very fast. I would have recited all of this, but I can't do. Final stage is this. She comes and she sits outside of her home. The tradition says that she was sitting there. Her husband Abdullah bin Ja'far comes. As he comes forward, what does he say? He says, oh woman, my wife's not at home. Please can you leave and wait for my wife to come? She looks up. A wife who has not seen her husband in so many months. After all of this bala that's fallen, she's looking for the comfort of her husband, and her husband doesn't recognize. She looks up and she says, Abdullah, recognize me. I'm Zainab. When she lifts up her hand, Abdullah falls to the ground. She looks up and she says, Abdullah, what makes you fall to the ground? She says, Zainab, tell me, what are these marks on your hand? Look, I can't recite anything more. Allah accept your Azaa. Allah accept your dua. Final thing I'm going to say is this. Zainab goes into the house. A mother's a mother. What does she do? When she goes into the small hujra where only Muhammad used to be, she sees two musallas lying there. She grabs them. She puts them on her chest. She says, Onan Muhammad, without you I can't live anymore. Matam Hussain.
اللهم صل على محمد وعلى محمد وعلى آج بھی زینب کی آتی ہے صدا بائی حسین آج بھی زینب کی آتی ہے صدا بائی حسین تیرا چہرہ تیری آنکھیں بھول کب پائی حسین آج بھی زینب کی آتی ہے صدا بائی حسین چلتے ناکے سے گرایا خود کو جلتی ریت پر چلتے ناکے سے گرایا خود کو جلتی ریت پر گھٹنیوں کے بل میں تیری لاش ٹک آئی حسین آج بھی زینب کی آتی ہے صدا بائی حسین بس میں گھبرائی تھی خنجر تجھ پہ چلتا دیکھ کر بس میں گھبرائی تھی خنجر تجھ پہ چلتا دیکھ کر پھر کسی مشکل میں گر کر میں نہ گھبرائی حسین آج بھی زینب کی آتی ہے صدا بائی حسین کون تھا جو مرنے والوں میں نہیں تھا خوبرو کون تھا جو مرنے والوں میں نہیں تھا خوبرو بھولنے بہتی تو کس کس کی نہ یاد آئی حسین آج بھی زینب کی آتی ہے صدا بائی حسین بہہ رہے تھے آنکھ سے آنسو تیری رخصت کے وقت بہہ رہے تھے آنکھ سے آنسو تیری رخصت کے وقت پھر کوئی آنسو نہ ٹپکا آنکھ پترائی حسین آج بھی زینب کی آتی ہے صدا بائی حسین ہاتھ میں کوزے لیے سب آسمان تکتے رہے ہاتھ میں کوزے لیے سب آسمان تکتے رہے اب ایک بوند پانی کی نہ برسائی حسین آج بھی زینب کی آتی ہے صدا بائی حسین دور افتادہ سفر سے لوٹ کر میں نے نوید دور افتادہ سفر سے لوٹ کر میں نے نوید ٹھنڈا پانی جب پیا بس تیری یاد آئی حسین آج بھی زینب کی آتی ہے صدا بائی حسین اللہم صل علی محمد وآل محمد
بلا کر سب کو حضرت نے کہا ہے کربلا والو بلا کر سب کو حضرت نے کہا ہے کربلا والو ہمیں درکار ہے تھوڑی سی جائے کربلا والو بلا کر سب کو حضرت نے ارادہ ہے اسی جنگل میں گھر اپنا بنائیں گے ارادہ ہے اسی جنگل میں گھر اپنا بنائیں گے نہیں تا حشر اب تم سے جدا ہے کربلا والو بلا کر سب میں چھپ جاؤں گا گر ایک مٹھی خاک ڈالو گے میں چھپ جاؤں گا گر ایک مٹھی خاک ڈالو گے یوں ہی بن جائے گا مرکز میرا ہے کربلا والو بلا کر سب کو حضرت نے ملے گا چین باد مرکبی بے کس کو تربت میں ملے گا چین باد مرکبی بے کس کو تربت میں ہلے گا حشر تک مرکز میرا ہے کربلا والو بلا کر سب کو حضرت نے. عجب غربت ہے اپنی ایسی غربت پر وطن صدقے. عجب غربت ہے اپنی ایسی غربت پر وطن صدقے. جسے سمجھے ہم اپنا مدعا کربلا والوں بلا کر سب کو حضرت نے کہا کربلا. ہماری قبر پر آنا تو دو آنسو بہا جانا. ہماری قبر پر آنا تو دو آنسو بہا جانا. ملے فرصت تو پڑھنا فاتحہ کربلا والوں بلا کر سب کو حضرت نے. رہے گی تاب چہلم لاش بے گورو کفن سب کی. رہے گی تاب چہلم لاش بے گورو کفن سب کی. میرے ناموس ہوں گے بے ردا کربلا والوں بلا کر سب کو حضرت نے کہا. محب آئیں جو بعد مرگ بے کس کی زیارت کو. محب آئیں جو بعد مرگ بے کس کی زیارت کو. بتا دینا انہیں میرا پتہ کربلا والوں بلا کر سب کو حضرت نے کہا کربلا والوں. ہمیں درکار ہے تھوڑی سی جائے کربلا والوں بلا کر سب. محمد وآل محمد صلوات.
اللهم صل على